really excited for today's guest because it is something that I am self-admittedly not great at and working to get better every day. And I thought maybe you might not be great at it either. So I'm really excited to bring my friend Kwame in. He is, I mean, he's amazing. Hopefully you did some Google stalking on him. If you didn't, we'll drop a link, but I'll kind of give you the 411. Kwame is an amazing, he's a LinkedIn learning instructor like me. He has 3 courses with them, all about negotiation, tackling hard topics, having difficult conversations. He's also a professor at Ohio State, teaching negotiation and meditation advocacy. He's a lawyer. I know, where does he have time to do all this stuff? He's a lawyer. And he also contributes to Forbes. When does he sleep? I don't know, but we're going to find out. So if you could help me in welcoming me to join us.
Hey, Kim, thanks for having me.
How are you?
Doing great. How are you doing?
Great. Okay, so I just gave kind of like the 411 about you, but I'm curious because something we always talk about here is how you represent yourself is not always the same as maybe like your best friend or your coworker, or in this case, I'm like hyping you up. I would introduce you. So I'm curious for you, how would you introduce yourself to somebody like at a party or a work event?
Yeah, that's something I'm still trying to figure out, Kim, because I'm a stereotypical Caribbean American. I have multiple jobs here. So I think the main thing is I'm the director of the American Negotiation Institute. We do negotiation and conflict resolution trainings that make difficult conversations easier. That's the easiest answer that I can give.
Because you are doing a lot, as I just listed.
Yeah, yeah. Still trying to find time for sleep, and my 2-month-old is not helping.
Oh my gosh. No, you're not. Sleep is not on your agenda, but hopefully helping us is. I was so excited to talk to you because negotiating is hard and difficult conversations are super duper hard. And so I'm curious, I have so many questions for you, but kind of the first one right off the bat is, why is it necessary for people to learn the skill of negotiation? I'm sure you have people that tell you like, I don't have time to learn that, or I don't feel like it.
Yeah, so I think coming back to our motto at the American Negotiation Institute can be instructive here. So we believe the best things in life are on the other side of difficult conversations. And so when you look at your life, whether it's success or failure in your personal life or your professional life, whatever it happens to be, to a large degree, it's going to be dependent on how well you have these difficult conversations. And so the reality is you're having the difficult conversations, you're negotiating every day. And we describe a negotiation as anytime you're in a conversation and somebody in the conversation wants something. So if you happen to interact with humans, you are negotiating. So you might as well do it well.
I have this theory when it comes to negotiation, or I guess not necessarily negotiation when somebody wants something and it's like, I want Chinese food for dinner, although sometimes that is a negotiation too. But more so like the hard conversations, like negotiating contracts or payments or client deals or promotion or a raise. I have a theory that there's 2 types of people. There's plague people and there's pool people. And the plague people see that conflict and see that difficult conversation and they run like the plague that it is. Like they're like, get me out of here. I don't want to deal with this. Like I'm out. And then the pool people are also my people that like love debate in college or in high school. And they're like ready to jump in the pool. They're like, oh, a negotiation? Like cannonball, like I'm here. So do you teach differently to like those 2 types of people, or is it kind of a one size fits all depending on who you're working with?
No, it has to be custom tailored. So it has to be custom tailored to yourself and to the person. So the thing is, we all are unique. And actually, one of my most recent LinkedIn learning course was how to lead and motivate different personalities. And so when you learn to appreciate the fact that we're built differently in many ways, genetically, just psychologically, and then also when you think about the nature and nurture debate, we're going to be raised in different contexts, different cultures, those type of things. you're going to recognize that there's going to be a different blueprint that you would use in a situation than I would use in the exact same situation. And so it's not just getting an understanding of the skills in general, but understanding who you are as a person and how you personally would interact with those skills too.
Oh my God. But then is it hard then? Because I've watched your LinkedIn learning courses and I feel like I see parts of me in every one. Is it hard then for you to kind of make those generic courses if everything is usually very custom that you do?
It is. It is, because when they ask me to do these courses, I'm like, how many days do I have? Oh, 30 minutes. Great. All right, so let's figure this out. So of course it's an oversimplification for sure. But I think that's the one of the beauties of human psychology. That's my undergrad degree. I think people often think, oh yeah, Kwame is the guy who does negotiation because he has the master's in public policy, he's the lawyer, business lawyer, those type of things. But really it's my love of psychology that brought me to this. And one of the jokes that they say about people in psychology is that you want to study the thing that you are struggling with. And for me, it was about social anxiety, fear of difficult conversations, those type of things. And so as I was learning about those problems and how you can overcome them, that's when I started to make that shift in my goal for what I wanted to do, because I wanted to help other people. And so with my book, Finding Confidence in Conflict, it's all about that. Because like you said, I used to be a plague person for sure. That's how I was. That's how I was designed. That's how I was socialized. But then once I realized, hey, this is a skill, I can learn this. And if I understand my personal psychology, I can figure out how to tweak this. That's when I started to recognize, oh, there's another life out here for me to live. And it's really, really exciting once I start to lean in and have these conversations.
Well, and it's leaning in that's the hard part. And I love this question from Bruno, hot tips that work in any type of negotiation, which I think is going to be more of like your own mindset maybe than the other person. Because obviously it's different if you're negotiating with your roommate or your spouse versus your boss or a coworker. But is there kind of an overall hot tip that you could give?
Oh yeah, it's really quite simple. Simple to say, difficult to do. Okay. If you want to improve your negotiation skills, difficult conversation, etc. To me, it's all the same, right? Just different goals. So if you want to improve your negotiation skills, you just need to do two things. Number one, improve your ability to manage emotions, both your own emotions and the emotions of others. Number two, ask more questions. That's it.
Ask more questions. Wait, tell me more.
That was great. Well done. That's a great way to ask a question, right? So here it is. So with our approach to difficult conversations, it's called the compassionate curiosity framework. And it's 3 steps. First, acknowledge and validate emotions. Second, get curious with compassion. And third, joint problem solving. When it comes to persuading people, it's not so much about convincing them to see things your way. It's about asking them questions to lead them to what you want them to do and what's best for both people. Because if you're just doing this for your own benefit without regard to their own well being, that's not persuasion, that's manipulation. It's the exact same thing, but a different intent. And so we want to make sure that we're doing this ethically. So we're trying to make sure that we're keeping their best interests in mind. Right. And I think one of my favorite sayings in negotiation is from some Harvard professors who wrote Negotiating in 3D. And it's Lax and Sabinius. Those are the 2 co-authors. And they said,
Okay.
negotiation is really the art of letting them have your way. Because ultimately, when it's all said and done, I want you to absorb the reality that you came to this decision. You had complete autonomy and control over your decision-making process, and you chose this. I didn't force you to do it. And once people feel that way, that's when your deals become a lot stickier. They're not going to resist anymore because it was ultimately their choice. You just helped them to come to that conclusion.
Hmm. Okay, so walk me through, like, I'm very tactile. So can
Yeah.
you walk me through, obviously it's like a very 10,000 foot view, but can you walk me through like an example of what that could look like? Or an example
Yeah.
of like, I'm somebody that's trying to convince my boss to give me a raise. Like how would you do that?
And quick aside, by the way, Kim, it's so funny running a company that talks so much about negotiation in general, but also salary negotiation. And I see my staff posting about salary negotiation. I'm like, okay, let me just wait a couple of weeks. Here it comes, you know. But what's really funny is that I think this is a great example. 2 of my key employees essentially negotiated that we're on the team. And so Maria Eaton, she was she was an intern, and so she went from the internship, and she really enjoyed it. And we didn't have, and I told her this, we didn't have any intention of bringing her on at the time, but she really wanted to be on. So she's like, "What can I do to get on the team part time?" Well, I said, "Okay, we need to do X, Y, Z things, because if you were able to do that, then you pay for yourself, right?" She's able to do it. Deal made, part time. Then she said a couple months later, "I want to be full time. What would it take?" We walked through it, and now here we are. It's a win-win negotiation. So you have to be clear about what you want, understand what the other people want, and then work together to get to that solution. And so it's a great example of the compassionate curiosity framework. So acknowledge and validate the emotions. Okay, there's a desire there. No, not high level emotionality. So it's not as applicable in this particular conversation. So if there's no emotionality that's getting in the way, transition seamlessly into getting curious with compassion. So she asked questions, I asked questions, we gathered information, and then it's joint problem solving. This is just collaborative negotiation. We're trading ideas, seeing what it would take to make this work.
I think the hardest part of that, I would guess, I don't know, you tell me, because you work with people more on this than I do, clearly, but I would imagine it's very difficult to remove the emotions from the situation. Like if you really want that job or you really want to move from part-time to full-time, it reminds me of, like, I don't know if you've ever watched Star Trek. I'm clearly a super dork, but there's this character Spock, and like he takes away all feelings. He's like a robot, like kind of have to go Spock on people, where it's like you're not getting emotional, overly upset or excited. That's really tough.
It is tough. Not possible either, because there's a disorder called alexithymia, and these are people who literally cannot feel emotions. And so sometimes you say to yourself, "Man, it'd be great if I didn't feel anything." I say that all the time, right? But the problem with people with alexithymia is they can't make decisions, because emotions are a critical part of decision making. So even if we could remove all emotion from it, we shouldn't do it, because we wouldn't be able to function. And so that's why it's about managing the emotions. So it's about being too hot versus too cold, right? So there's that Goldilocks zone of emotionality. We don't want to be in a position where it's taking us too far off the rails. And now here's the thing, Kim, that people don't often recognize, is that they often focus so much on negative emotions: anger, sadness, disappointment, disgust, rage, whatever it happens to be. And they're like, those are the emotions that I need to manage in myself and in others. But people don't recognize that that positive emotions can have a negative impact too, right? So think about times where you've been with a friend, you're having a great conversation with a friend, and then the friend says, "Oh, hey, by the way, I'm moving in a couple of months. Can you help me move?" And you're like, "Oh yeah, buddy, I can help you move." And then 2 months later, it's the day of the move, and you're like, "What in the world am I doing? I have a full-time job. It's Wednesday. Why did I say yes to this?" Right? That's a bad decision, and you let your emotions get in the way. Frankly, now that I think about it, a lot of those times where I got caught helping people move, I'm like, I would rather just pay to have you move. That would be much more preferable to me. But again, the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that processes emotions, whenever that part of the brain is firing and highly active, it has a detrimental effect on your frontal lobe, where the prefrontal cortex is, where you have logical reasoning, rational thinking, all those things. So yes, when you're angry, when you're sad, all those things, you're not thinking as clearly. But also if you're super happy, super giddy, you're not thinking as clearly either. So you have to manage both sides of the spectrum.
Oh, that hit home. Like that's me. Like I've done that. Not only have I done that, I continue to do that, especially if I've had an alcoholic beverage
Yes.
or two. I'm like, I can definitely help you move. No problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it
Well, think
never
about
turns
it
out
too.
well.
Think about it in terms of being drunk with emotion. I think if you think about it in that term, then it makes a lot more sense. And so you and I, we both have that people pleaser in us. Let's harken back to the course on leading and motivating different personalities. And so if you have that people pleaser, you have to recognize, okay, hey, this is my genetic makeup. I get it. So my strategy needs to be different. So I know in the moment, I'm going to be pulled in your direction. That's what's going to happen in the moment. And so I have to slow down these interactions and make it clear up front. I'm not making a decision in front of you. I'm going to step away from you, and then I'm going to sleep on it, and I'm going to come tomorrow with my conclusion. Okay. And so that's the unique shift that you make strategically based on your unique psychology. Somebody else who's higher in disagreeableness, then it doesn't matter. They let people down all the time. I don't care if you like me, whatever. Right. That's not me. I can't do that.
It definitely depends on each person. And I love that sort of curiosity, that keep asking questions, that, get into a conversation with someone and almost reframe it in your mind from a negotiation to a conversation. If you find yourself, you're like, okay, good job, Kim. I'm doing great. I'm asking these questions. They're asking questions back. This is awesome. And then all of a sudden, maybe you only set up an hour of time with them, or maybe you only set up a half hour at a time. You start running out of time, but you haven't wrapped up your point, or you haven't figured out how to get to a happy place between the two of you. What do you do in that situation?
Well, I will answer with an unsatisfying lawyer response and say it depends. It
Yes.
depends. So here's the thing. I like the term called micro negotiations. And so a lot of times, if there's high levels of emotionality or complexity in the situation, best thing for you to do is to take this in bite-sized pieces. I'm not going to close this deal today. I'm not going to come to a conclusion today, but I will get through a little bit. And so if we take it through the framework of compassionate curiosity, I'm staying in level 1 and level 2. So I'm saying acknowledge and validate emotions, get curious with compassion. No problem solving, not today, right? And so then I can break it up into little pieces. I can pace this at the right, moving in the right way. But there are going to be some situations where, yeah, I do need to come to a conclusion today. So in those situations, what I like to do is set expectations up front. Because as the time starts to dwindle, then I'm going to start moving the conversation forward. And so if you do that without giving them that expectation, then they're going to think, oh, Kim doesn't care about me. Look, Kim's brushing me aside. Oh, she's annoyed. That's why she's trying to end this. She's annoyed, right? They're going to come up with all of these horrible reasons as to why you're acting the way that you are toward the end of this conversation. So you have to set that expectation clearly. So when you do have to move the conversation forward and advance through the framework and then push it closer to joint problem solving, they understand why it is that you're doing it.
It's such a good point of really kind of getting everybody on the same page. I feel like a lot of times that's where the miscommunication happens. Some people are on another chapter and other people are on a different book. And you're like, oh wow, we came in with totally different reference points. When you kind of get into this mode, what happens if at any point you start to feel yourself losing confidence, or maybe they start to talk about something you don't know about, or they ask you a question you don't know the answer to? Is the best method sort of the point you made earlier of let me sleep on it and get back to you, or let me circle back on this conversation or that specific point?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I think about it in terms of parenting. So I have a 2-month-old and a 5-year-old. Okay. And so I know with certain messes, you can't come back from it. So you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Once it's out. Right. And so I'm not going to freestyle and hope I got it. That's not the way that we do it. Now, of course, you will have more confidence the more you prepare. And so if the listeners go to americannegotiationinstitute.com/guide, they can get access to all of our 15 plus free negotiation guides that help you prepare effectively. But if you find yourself in that situation and you're saying to yourself, well, yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. What I tell my clients, if it's in the legal context or with the negotiation consulting or anything like that, even if it's somebody on the other side of the table, if they ask me a question, um, I'll tell them I don't know, but I can't figure it out. I'm a researcher. That's what lawyers are. We find answers, right? Oh, that's a good question. Let me check back and get back to you. No, I need an answer. Well, I mean, the information didn't get into my head in the last 7 seconds. So I'm going to get back to you on that. And the thing is, one of the things that you'll see in the preparation guides is the fact that you're supposed to try to anticipate the questions that they're going to ask. Specifically, what are the questions that you don't want them to ask? Assume that they'll ask that and come up with a solution in beforehand. So a lot of times, if you don't know what to say, it's one of two things. Number one, it's an indictment of your preparation. You didn't take the time to prepare enough. And number two, it's that you don't know what to do when you don't know what to say. And my simple rule is, if you don't know what to say in a difficult conversation, the next thing that you should say should come in the form of a question. Curiosity is almost always the answer.
Interesting. So you just kind of rack your brain to come up with another question if you find yourself stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. So imagine if somebody asks me a question I don't know the answer to, and I'll say, oh, hey, that's a great question. Honestly, I'm not sure right now, but I can get back to you. But out of curiosity, what is it that you hope to achieve by understanding that? then I can get to the root of why they're asking the question. Usually there's something beneath the surface that's really bothering them. And now I'm in control of the conversation again because I'm asking the questions. Because think about this, Kim. In this conversation that we're having, I'm talking way, way, way more. But who's in control of this interaction? It's you. You're asking the questions. People don't recognize that it's the person who's asking the questions who is in control of the interaction, even if the other person is doing the majority of the talking, right? So in my conversations, I try to follow the 70-30 rule when I'm listening 70% of the time and only talking 30%. And so that's when I know I'm getting more information and I'm controlling the conversation, not in a Machiavellian manipulative type of way, but more so making sure that I'm steering the conversation in a direction that's moving us both towards productivity.
I love that. And I'm really thankful that you're talking 70% of the time because I want to like suck everything that's in your brain and put it in my brain. I love this point from Jen, which is so much of the preparation, I would imagine, is not only how to say things and when to say it and how to phrase things, but also mindset and emotional work as well. So, do the guides also cover that part of it?
Those guides don't. Well, actually, there's a workbook for finding confidence in conflict, my book, so that could help.
Okay.
But here's something that is, I'm glad that she asked this question because it gave me an opportunity to tell you all this. So, with the compassionate curiosity framework, okay, acknowledge and validate emotions, get curious with compassion, joint problem solving. It's very clear how that works with an external negotiation, but it's also designed for internal negotiation for introspection and emotional regulation. So the same framework can be applied internally. So I'm going to acknowledge and validate my own emotions. What am I feeling? Okay, what else am I feeling? Because oftentimes it's an emotional cocktail. It's not just one thing. So what am I feeling? Okay, I'm going to acknowledge that. And then I'm going to ask myself, why am I feeling that way? What led me to feel this way? Right? I'm going to get curious with self-directed compassion because a lot of times we're our own worst enemies. We are the people who are so self-critical, and so if we're too self-critical, then we're not going to go through the introspective process because it feels bad, right? And then the last step, joint problem solving, this is where you're reconciling the differences between your heart and your mind. So what is it that I know logically is the correct solution for this situation? What honors my substantive goals? But at the same time, what is it that honors my emotional goals? Oftentimes those two things can be in conflict. And if they're not aligned, then we're going to be confused in our conversation externally. And the other person won't even know to solve our problems. Or even worse, you honor your brain, but not your heart, and you go out and negotiate competently, and you end up getting a great deal that leaves you emotionally broken. That's a bad place to be in.
Mm-mm. No, that's not good. I've been there. It's not great. Wouldn't recommend.
Exactly.
Don't recommend you get that passport stamp. I'm so glad you brought this up because I specifically wrote this down to talk about. So, you have a book, you lightly mentioned it. It's called Finding Confidence in Conflict. We'll drop the link, but people can go and pick it up. Um, you specifically talk about in the book negotiating with yourself. And that to me was like, moment, like golden nugget moment. When are we negotiating with ourselves? How are we usually negotiating with ourselves? Because that to me was sort of an aha moment because my brain, the minute I hear negotiation, I immediately envision another person. Like I immediately envision another human. And so when you phrase it as negotiating with yourself, it sort of stopped me in my tracks because I never think of that. I never think of it that way. So I'm curious like how you stumbled upon that or what that looks like.
Yeah, and my understanding of this is deepening as I do more research on it too. I think a great way to think about it is this. So there's a book out right now called Chatter, and it's talking about the voice in your head. And one of the things that they say is that, first of all, we're talking all the time to ourselves, like we're nonstop, nonstop. That's one thing. The second thing is that if you refer to yourself in the third person, so for you, Kim, it would be like talking to yourself as Kim should do this. Kim really needs to do that. It creates some perspective, some distance, and it's almost like you're othering yourself. So you're kind of coaching yourself. And once you think about it in terms of negotiating with yourself, then you're realizing, oh, interesting. This is kind of meta here. So it's not just listening to that one voice in my head that's telling me to do things. I want this, I want that, and we just go with it. we start to challenge our thoughts. It helps us to go deeper and deeper and deeper. Because in a negotiation, I will compassionately and respectfully challenge other people's perspectives, right? How do you know that's true? Okay, what do you want, and why exactly do you want that? How is that helpful? All right, but you also have this other competing perspective. What about that, right? And so I'm going to go deeper when I'm negotiating with other people. I'm going to push them. And so here we're pushing ourselves compassionately to dig deeper, to get deeper level insights, to figure out who we truly are and what we truly want. And then once we have that internal clarity, now we can have these conversations with much more clarity. Right? We don't want to be in a conversation having, self revelations. I mean, that can happen, preferably in therapy. That's good. That's great. But if it's happening in like a negotiation and you're discovering things about yourself, you probably should have prepared a little bit better, not just substantively in terms of investigation and research and strategic preparation, but also when it comes to self reflection. What is it that you want and why? So then you can negotiate authentically and really advocate for yourself in a true, deep, and meaningful way. It helps you to be a lot more assertive with what you want while still being respectful.
It's so true. You have to do so much of the work before you actually get in the room, which is true for probably a lot of things in business, but especially negotiating with yourself or others. I'm curious, I love this question from Jeff, which is for you who lives in this and breathes in this every single day, 365 days a year. When you picture negotiating, does anything immediately come up for you? Like, do you have that immediate feeling of fight or flight or conflict or joy?
Again, it depends. It's hard to answer because the thing that comes to mind is it's too broad. Because again, my podcast is called Negotiate Anything for a reason. Kim, you were on the show, right? And so it's like we're negotiating everything. So we have different people coming in from different contexts, family, work, whatever it happens to be. I consider all of these interactions negotiations. And so I think for me, Jeff, to answer your question, it's like I think about negotiation more like a life philosophy more than a skill. Is it a skill? For sure it is. But when I think about it more like a life philosophy, now I'm filtering every single human interaction through this lens. And it helps me to be more intentional about the way that I interact with people. And so if I think about it as negotiating with my son, negotiating with my wife, I have to do that very compassionately. If I think about it negotiating with opposing counsel, I need to be a little bit more assertive, right? But if I think about each interaction as a negotiation, then I feel less nervous when I do have a big negotiation that is more transactional and the world would identify as a negotiation. And so I think it's just really a mindset shift, recognizing that these skills can be utilized everywhere. And so it's about pulling the different levers, right? And it's constant experimentation. And when you think about experimentation, you develop a hypothesis. This is what I think I'm going to do. Then you test it, you get the results, then you tweak it. Because sometimes I say, all right, cool. All right, I know how to negotiate. Hey, conversation with my wife, great. I'm going to approach it this way. After it was done, fantastic, Kwame, you did a great job. Then I started asking people for feedback after conversations, just to see if I did in fact do a good job. And when he's like, excuse me, sir, no, you did not do a good job, because even though it was productive and even though that we got to a conclusion, I felt like I was talking to Kwame the lawyer, not Kwame the husband. Okay, tone matters. I need to change my tone when I'm talking to Whitney. Great. So it's constantly experimenting and then making these tweaks. And so I think that's one of the things that you have to recognize, is that you have to be a student of the game. You've never got it. You're constantly getting it.
And speaking of being a student of the game, one of the questions I wrote down, because I was just super juicy curious, when was the last time that you went into negotiation and you were peeing your pants? Like you were like, oh, poop.
Yeah, this was in May. It was in May. And so here's the thing, Kim. This happens, it's actually started to happen a little bit more often now, because it's like, oh, you're the negotiation guy now. Let's see what you got, right? So it's like I have a reputation to live up to. So I feel a little bit more of that external pressure. So I'll just be honest with you there. But oftentimes what I've recognized is that my lack of confidence or my fear, my nervousness is usually due to a lack of preparation. And so when I take the time to prepare using those guides that I referred to earlier, AmericanNegotiationInstitute.com/guide, then I feel much, much better, a lot calmer. And I think about it almost like an old school martial arts teacher, just stick to the form. Just stick to the form. That's it. And so it was a really tough negotiation. I was representing a company, and we got to the point where the CEOs were trading offensive emails back and forth. It was very bad. And so we thought the absolute worst was going to happen. And I wasn't sure exactly what to do about the situation. And so I said, you know what, Kwame, again, internal negotiation, getting a little meta with it. If you were somebody else and you were coaching this person through the negotiation, what would you do? It became very clear at that time. Ask questions, manage emotions. That was it. I didn't even need to graduate to those higher level negotiation techniques, right? It didn't even need to get there. It was a misunderstanding, and we resolved it by sticking to the framework and doing nothing else, right? But again, I think this demonstrates a very interesting nuance too, because I'm the lawyer representing the company. We're negotiating with the other side, right? I also have to negotiate with my client. I have to negotiate with my client to moderate those expectations. I have to manage those expectations. I also have to manage the roles of and responsibilities during the conversation. This is exactly what's going to happen, right? To make sure that the client stays in line. Because Kim, if I perform flawlessly and then my client blurts out something ridiculous, can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. I'm done. So it was not that long ago, but again, the solution was very simple. You can only do the best you can do and stick to the principles because they're tried and true. That was a rhyme, and I made it for you.
I love that. Should we do a remix?
No.
I always love a good remix. Can someone drop a beat? I don't know. I know. I love that. And I feel like you mentioned in that answer the podcast. And I know Claudia was talking about the podcast. We haven't actually officially talked about the podcast. We talked about the book, which is finding confidence in conflict. But then there's the podcast, Negotiate Anything, which I was on as well. So tell us a little bit about the podcast.
Yes. So it's actually 3 podcasts now. So we have Negotiate Anything. It's actually, thankfully, the top ranked negotiation podcast in the world, over 3 million downloads there, 400 plus episodes. We have Ask with Confidence, which is all about women in negotiation. So talking about leadership, conflict management, and it's done by Catherine Kanapke and Maria Eaton, our chief operating officer and head of content. And then we also have a Spanish podcast called Negociación desde Cero. It's by Simón Perez, who's our head of Latin American affairs. So 3 shows. And so, again, we just want to get diverse perspectives on the topic because, again, I think one of the things that we're trying to do is rebrand the negotiation. It's not the stuffy, unapproachable, scary type of thing, just helping people to recognize that these conversations are happening all the time. So we want to get perspectives from all sorts of different areas of the world, different industries, even personal, everything. And so it's been a lot of fun building the podcast, a lot of work, but it's been paying off, and the feedback has been really, really positive.
It's really nice when you do all the work to go into something creative like that and ship that creative work, and then you just kind of cross your fingers and you're like, if a tree falls in the forest, does anyone hear it? Like, is anyone catching the value that I'm putting out? So I totally commend you on that, because I feel like one podcast is usually, at least for me, super impressive. The fact that you have 3 and the book and all these guides, I mean, it's incredible.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
It was incredible. Where can people find these 3 podcasts?
Yeah, so they are all on actually all of the podcast players. I need to double check to make sure that we have the Spanish language podcast on Apple Podcasts, because I think that one, at last time I checked, was only on Spotify. So I need to double check. But the other ones, everywhere you can get them.
Everywhere. Obviously, you've done a ton of podcast episodes, whether it is for women or everyone or in the Spanish language ones. What are like the top 2 pieces of advice that you find yourself giving constantly? Like, just people, you wish they would absorb it, but they don't.
Yeah, and and this comes up with guests a lot too. Everybody says listening, right? And everybody's like, listening. Okay, you're right. Okay, whatever, right? Here's the thing. Here's something that I learned this year that was really mind-blowing. People say that they want to be heard. People say that they want people to listen to them, right? But it's not true. That's not true. They think it's true, but it's not. right? So here's an example. So Kim, let's talk. Let's say we're having a conversation, we're friends, we're chatting, blah blah blah, and we're in person. And then the whole time you're talking, I'm here on my cell phone. The whole time, the entire time, you're going to accuse me of not listening, right? But
I did that to my fiance last night, but he actually wasn't listening.
there you
He
go.
wasn't. I was like, "Are you hearing me?"
That's funny. So here, let's use this scenario. Let's roll with that scenario. See, now my phone was activated and my wife called right
It heard
when
us.
it was right
It
there.
heard us. The
Yes.
Google always hears. It like heard phone and it was like, phone. I could do
crazy.
that.
But so in that situation, let's say let's change what happened. So let's
Yeah.
say that your fiance said, "Okay, actually, Kim, I was listening," and he gave a flawless transcript of everything that you said. Would you feel satisfied?
No.
Exactly. So people say that they want to be heard. People say that they want people to listen to them, but that's not what they want. What they want
And that's
is
actually what happened too.
See, the timing is perfect. Timing is perfect. What people really want is validation. Validation. That's the next level. So it's not just listening and absorbing the words, it's then demonstrating that you care. Demonstrating that you care. And I like to take that root of the word valid for validation, right? It's also demonstrating an attempt to find the validity in what the person is saying. So it's not me trying to put myself in your shoes. It's me accepting that I am not you and trying my best, even though it's impossible, to see it from your perspective, and then show you through my summary of what you said that I understand it more from your perspective than from mine. Now, that's validation. That's what people want. In order to validate effectively, you have to listen, but listening by itself is not enough.
I love that. I love that. That's so good. To Jane's point, that sort of active listening, it's not only repeating back what they said, but really feeling like you're capturing their emotions and what they're trying to express to you, probably on like a subliminal level as well.
Exactly.
I love that. Okay, as we mentioned, you are super busy. And I obviously, like you, have a lot going on. And so this is like my own selfish question. Everyone else, I told you could ask questions in the chat. Now it's time for my question, which is, how do you manage all this? Like, do you have apps? Are you calendar blocking? Do you have a team of like 17 elves that like magically do things for you? Like, how are you actually getting it all done? Because I cannot be the only one who hears you say things like the book, the podcasts with an S. Obviously you have clients in the legal space. Then you have like your work with Forbes or writing. Like, how are you doing all this?
Yeah, so this is something that I'm still working on, Kim. And so one is delegation, trusting my team. COVID really helped me just trial by fire because my wife's a doctor, and her job's more important than mine. And so when COVID happened, she had to see patients, so I had to take care of Kai. I had no choice but to rely on my team, and they are highly skilled. And so relying on them, delegation is important. Systems, constantly tweaking and revisiting systems, that's really important. Being honest about what I'm good at and where I'm weak at, and so I think it's important to fire incompetent people, and I recognize that I was quite incompetent at a lot of things. I had to fire myself from a lot of stuff, Kim, and give it to people who could do it a lot better than me. So those are some really important things. Something that I'm working on is saying no, because there are too many things that I'm doing right now. Because right now we have the LinkedIn Learning, of course. We have me running the team at American Negotiation Institute. I still work sometimes part-time at a law firm just to make sure that I'm keeping my skills sharp. And so then I also write for Forbes, and I'm a professor at Ohio State's law school and a professor at the MBA program. And my head is exploding. Oh, that's right. I have a manuscript to finish on Thursday, and I feel like I'm going to die. This was not smart, Kim. These were choices that I made, and I regret a lot of them. And so you have to start saying no. And so as you start to advance in your career, what you have to recognize is that you are going to get to a point where in the past you're like, I will take an okay opportunity because I just need to survive. But then you get to a point where you're like, I need to say no to good opportunities for great opportunities. And so that's something I'm still working on, saying no to more things.
I love the fact that you're firing yourself. That just, I don't know why that tickles me and delights me. When you fire yourself, I assume when you're delegating that out, you might be hiring freelancers or maybe somebody part-time to help you out. And I feel like it leads so perfectly into Jamie's question. Hers is kind of coming from the other end as a service provider. You know, you might find an assistant part-time, or you might find somebody to help you ghostwrite, or an editor or something for, you know, or help with the podcast. How do you deal with negotiations around package pricing, around freelancers or clients that you might be working with?
Yeah, it's tough, especially when you're a service provider in an industry where the numbers are not publicly disclosed, right? And so you have to kind of accept the reality that there's going to be a lot of experimentation that has to happen, right? So you have to do some research to figure out what the going price in the market is as much as possible. That might require hiring a coach to give you the answers. Because a lot of times we just resort to Google and it's not there. Then we say, I guess it must not exist anywhere in the world because Google didn't tell me, right? But then if you find somebody who's experienced and you use them as a coach, that's very helpful. Like my team is very young, and so I recognize that since they don't have people above them, they have to have coaches who are more experienced. And so we have to do the same thing as leaders in our company. So that's going to be one specific piece of data that you can gather there. And then you have to see what the market can sustain. And I want you to know it's better to miss by going too high than too low, because every time you go too low, that becomes your new market rate. So if you have this client, it's going to be hard to raise that price. And that client is going to refer you to other clients who have that similar type of budget. So aim high, miss, and then calibrate lower than trying to start too low and calibrating upward.
And I imagine at some point, I would recommend to Jamie personally that at some point, to what you said, it's better to let the ones that are not a fit go. Like, it's better to say, I realize that I'm trying to charge you $2,000 and you want this for $1,000, but you know, I can't take you. It is what
Yeah.
it is.
Absolutely. And Kim, to that point, sometimes it was terrifying at the beginning doing that because you need everything to survive at the beginning. But I think one example is really instructive, because one time I said, yeah, no, I can't do it for that price anymore. And then 9 months later, they came back and they say, hey, we have the budget. Or that same person might say, okay, yeah, we weren't a fit, but actually my friend who does have more of a budget is a fit. And so it's really tough. It's really tough, but you have to start planning for the future today. And a lot of people are so focused on survival that they don't think about what it will look like to thrive. And so you're going to have to take a few lumps and pass up on some money when you really, really want and need that money now. But if you recognize that entrepreneurship is a lot about, it's a game of endurance, it's a game of, I'm just choosing not to fail and I will survive long enough to succeed, then you say, well, I will be here in 3 years. If this pays off in 3 years, I'll be here, and so you have to have that long-term perspective.
100%. And Jamie, I will tell you this, like a little anecdote from my life. So my marketing agency, Broad Ideas Only, we have all sorts of Fortune 500 clients and pretty big artists. And I will not disclose who this was, but I had an artist who wanted to create this product for holiday. And it was a really tight timeline. This was like 2 years ago, before COVID. And I looked at everything they wanted. I looked at the specs. I looked at the price they wanted to pay, what they wanted to charge. I looked at it, and I've been in this business for 10 years. I was like, that's not going to work. It's not going to work. The price that you're trying to go for, I was like, you can't get it for that price. And I'm telling you that because I've been doing this 10 years and I know this. And they're like, no, Kim, you're too expensive. We found somebody who's going to do it overseas. And I was like, I am telling you this as not just like you're my client. I'm actually telling you this as a friend. Do not do this. Like, here are all the 3 things that are going to go wrong. It's like watching a car accident. I know it's going to go wrong. Here's what's going to happen. And the client did it because they wanted to save a buck instead of doing the plan that I had originally set out. And of course, sat back in my chair and I watched it fail spectacularly. And I was like, Miss Cleo, everything that I said was going to happen happened. And it was a disaster. And the time they spent trying to fix the mess, and then this was bad, and it was late to the fans, and the fans were pissed. And I just sat there going, was that worth the $5,000?
Oh man.
That you got mad at me about 3 months ago? Was that worth it? Because you spent more time. Time is money, as we all know. You spent more time cleaning up the mess of saving the money than you did if you just would have done it the way I told you to in the first place, which was more expensive. So, Jamie, I would use that as like a little go back, say, okay, you think you can do it better? You think you can do it at a lower price? You think you get the same quality of service that I'm offering you? Good luck and God bless. You know what I mean? Like, just, I'm out. So that I just had to add that little tidbit in, because sometimes it's just like, goodbye. So, okay, this is my favorite part of the conversation, which we're going to straight up copy your homework. My favorite. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay. What have you started using lately or doing lately that you are obsessed with? You're like, I love this app. I love this product. I love this service. You're like telling all your friends, oh my God, you have to either do this or get this.
Yes. Okay, Kim, this is going to blow your mind. So a lot of times people look at smartphones and technology, they're saying this is making my life better. It's making everything more efficient and everything like that. But they're not considering the cost it has on your attention. It makes your cognitive process less profound. You're struggling because you're distracted, right? The best thing that I got in the last week, Kim, was a phone jail. I bought a phone jail. Yeah.
What is a phone jail?
Go online and Google phone jail. So it's a timer. You put your phone in it and then it locks it. You can't open it until that time elapses. So I recognize I was like a little squirrel just trying to get to my phone like a freak. I'm like, I have a problem. What is wrong with me? And most of the time when I'm on my phone, I'm not even accomplishing anything productive, but I'm doing busy things. And so I walked into Walmart after buying this phone jail, locking it up. I recognized my laptop had too many apps and functionality and everything. So I walked into Walmart and I said, this isn't the word I use, but I'll edit it. I want your worst phone and your worst laptop. And they're like, oh, this one's pretty cheap. I said, no, sir.
Oh, no.
I don't care about whether it's cheap.
The worst.
I want it to be bad. And so I got a track phone and a really simple laptop and left my phone in phone jail and my laptop at home and went to my office, and I had nothing to do but be productive. It worked. You don't need anything more. You just need to focus.
I love it. You put yourself in jail.
Exactly. That's Martin Luther King Jr. wrote the letter from Birmingham jail because he had nothing else to do.
Exactly. Okay. So let's say you're taking your laptop that does nothing but type, and your phone that you can't even get into because it's in jail. What would be something that you're hoping to learn? Like, if you could just lock yourself in a room and you're like, I am going to learn this thing, what would be the next thing you're really hoping to learn?
Oh, this one's going to take you off, throw you off. Because I read a lot. I try to get through like a book a week and take a lot of notes on that. I use Audible, 3.5 times speed. Yeah, so you can go through it really fast. And but my business coach recognized that, like a lot of other hard charging people, I don't take time for myself. And I don't at all. It's either work or family responsibilities, and that's not great. So I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai. Yeah, I just started this week and I'm hooked. And so it's really cool because it was the first time in a long time where I was the beginner again. I felt like a kid, looking up to the coach, telling me what to do. I'd have no clue, and just learning something brand new for the sake of learning something brand new. It was a joy. And so that's what I'm doing. Just learning that martial arts. It feels great.
I love that. It is nice to be a beginner again.
Yeah.
Sort of triggers something very great. Mm-hmm. Gives you all the warm and fuzzies. Okay, I have this theory that because our phones that apparently need to be in phone jail, that it used to be the old saying was you are the summary of the 5 people you spend the most time with. But now with these, I have another theory, which is you are the summary of the people that you surround yourself with, both physically, but also digitally, because
Mhm.
you're looking at their Twitter, or you're looking at their LinkedIn Learning, or you're looking at their Instagram or whatever. So, are there a couple accounts, whether they could be humans,
Mhm.
like people, or they could be brands, or maybe a specific, TV show or something like that, that you follow online that just light you up? That you're like, every time I see their stuff or consume their stuff, I feel happier or smarter, or I love it.
Yeah, so the answer to this is kind of weird because of where I am in my life too. Because depending on what is happening, I'm going through different seasons. I need different things. So I remember when I was starting my business, trying to figure out how to build a personal brand, I would follow, for instance, Gary Vay. Right, everybody knows about Gary Vaynerchuk and his digital media empire, always posting all the time, those type of things. But eventually, you kind of graduate from his work to some other things, and so it depends on where I am in my life. And so now what I've been focusing on is curating content a little bit better. And so I stop and I ask myself, what is it that do I need? Okay, then who has that thing? All right. And so if I follow that person, I'll do it for a very short period of time, but then consume their best content. Like, think about it, somebody's tweets. You could look at somebody's tweets for a year, or you could just read their book. It's more efficient, right? So I'm trying to protect my mind a little bit more. So long story short, I don't have a good answer because I'm trying not to follow people. I want to be more in control of the content that's coming in.
I love that. What's the last person that you followed to learn something? Like if you were trying to, I don't know, start your podcast, did you follow somebody who is like a podcast creator or
Yes.
editor?
Pat Flynn. Pat
Pat
Flynn.
Flynn,
Pat Flynn,
Smart
Smart
Passive
Passive
Income.
Income. Yeah, he was actually
Yep.
on the podcast too. We actually had him on. Yeah, which is pretty cool. So yeah,
That's
he
kind of
built.
a full circle moment.
Oh my gosh, it was surreal. It was surreal.
Like you
Because
followed someone to learn more about the podcast and then they came on the podcast.
yes, it was incredible, Kim. So it was fun, because he built a digital media empire out of necessity because of the recession. And he's very, very generous with his processes and everything. So I think one of the strategic benefits that we have with the American Negotiation Institute is, every other negotiation consulting firm, they're saying, yeah, we're a negotiation consulting firm. We do negotiation trainings, right? Cool. That's true. But what we say is this, and we don't publicize this very much, but we say we're a media company first. We're a media company first. We're insanely generous with a lot of free content. We want to produce more free content than anybody else in the space. So that's why we have Forbes, LinkedIn, then 3 podcasts and YouTube and everything. We're just giving it away for free. And then when people want to pay, then they pay a premium. But it's a business built on generosity, and it was kind of tailored after Pat Flynn.
I love that. I love a good full circle moment. Okay.
Yeah.
If you could give all of us homework this week that we all had to do, it could be to read a certain book. I will plug homework, which is someone like people should pick one of your podcasts or all, but maybe that's extra credit, but at least one to go listen to. But if you could give everybody homework this week that you think is going to make them better at work or in their lives, what homework assignment would you give us?
Just one thing. Use the compassionate curiosity framework. That's it. You have to make it a habit, right? Because I can tell you, hey, go buy my book, go do the podcast, all these things. But a lot of times people like to intellectualize things, and procrastination is more of a sign of fear. They keep on saying, no, I need to learn more. I need to learn more. I need to learn more. No, you don't. All you need to do is, number one, acknowledge and validate emotions. Number two, get curious with compassion. And number three, joint problem solving, and do that every day. Just do it. That's it.
I love that. So, so good. Oh my gosh. Kwame, where can people keep learning from you, or which social platform do you spend the most time on when your phone's not in
LinkedIn.
phone jail?
Yeah. LinkedIn for sure. LinkedIn for sure.
Okay,
If you want to
LinkedIn.
learn, more, check out LinkedIn. If you want to, see my kids, check out Instagram. That's why most people follow me at this point.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Kwame, thank you so much for taking the time, for sharing all of these golden nuggets. I really appreciate it. So I just wanted to send a big cheers from me to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And everybody else, we'll be here again next Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern, same time, same place. And if you want notes from Kwame, if you're like, what was that book he mentioned? Or what was that guide that he mentioned? Go to sendmenotes.com. Don't worry, don't stress, don't feel like you have to watch this over again. We will send you all the notes you need. So thank you so much, Kwame. It's good seeing you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Bye,
See ya.
everybody.